Well, when we are talking about the airline industry, when we are talking about the air travel industry, let's have a discussion around what are the trends right now and what is the industry doing, especially post-COVID, because COVID kind of disrupted the entire travel market. The airlines industry went into a loss. What have been some of these solutions they've looked for recovery, and what are the initiatives they are taking on making air travel more sustainable, reducing the carbon footprint, and also making a more customer-friendly event as far as travel is concerned. So for the next session, aviation session, the route to recovery, let me call on the moderator, Anita Mendiratta, founder and president, Anita Mendiratta and Associates. You know her very well. She was here moderating and taking on the sessions yesterday as well. So Anita, the next session is all yours.
It feels like Indian women are taking over the stage today. I quite like this. Leaders, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, assalamu alaikum. I'm delighted to be back with you today again, and I must say I'm so excited to be doing this panel. As much as I'm a tourism and development practitioner, I am, like Haldane, an aviation geek. So I'm very excited to be here because aviation is an industry of heroes. We forget that. We always look at them, and increasingly citizens are looking at them as a soft target from the point of view of, as Haldane said, let's just stop aviation and we will stop all of this damage in terms of the climate crisis. We don't need to imagine what it would be like to lose aviation. We lost aviation. For 2 years we were grounded. We saw what it did to economic health, mental health, physical health. And as Haldane said, we saw that when the borders and skies shut down, 5.4 million people were stranded somewhere and have to find their way home. We all know those people, and many of us were those people. We missed loved ones, we missed milestones, we missed weddings, we missed funerals. We just missed each other. And that's why it's so glorious being here today, because we can all be back together again. As much as we could have Zoomed this summit, Liz and Rocky knew they needed to make it happen huggably. And that's why we need aviation. So it's my great pleasure to have this conversation with two great people from the Asian aviation community who I'm very happy to bring to the stage. Stefano Baronci, the Director General of ACI, Airports Council International, Asia Pacific, and Mac Patel, Regional Sales Director of JAPAC OAG Aviation. Please. Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much. What happened? Now, one of the great things about an aviation panel, you know it's going to end on time, because otherwise we all miss our flight. So that's a good thing from that perspective. So first thing, I'm going to give you, you know how I do this. You each have 30 seconds. Please, can you explain what is ACI?
Yeah, Airports Council International is the trade association that represents 618 airports in Asia Pacific. We do communicate with institutional and industry stakeholders.
Brilliant. OAG, 30 seconds.
So OAG is a travel data company, and we operate within the travel ecosystem. And we are also very proud partners of PADA, been supporting PADA and its members with our data needs.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So you could see 30 seconds kept to time. Brilliant. Some of you, one of you, I think, landed early. Now, importantly, aviation is an industry of acronyms. I think there are few industries that have as many acronyms. So every time we have an acronym, I'm going to push you to please call it out. But importantly, I want to spend the time now bridging between travel and tourism and aviation. As I said, aviation has become a soft target, especially now when we look at what's happening. There are challenges. People are aching to get back out again. They are aching to be able to travel. And sadly, part of travel has become disappointment. And it's usually within the aviation space. Now, I'm calling this out purely from the point of view as, please, can you help us understand what exactly is going on in terms of the challenges of travel because of the interdependency of the links which are now exposed, and how is the aviation community trying to deal with this to be able to get everyone back in the skies again. Just so we understand, when we say it's airports, it's airlines, it's staffing, please explain more of the why.
Well, I just, in the shoes of the passenger, if I had to get to an airport in Asia a few months ago, it was a terrible experience. And I had to experience that, frankly speaking. But the main reason for it was because the decisions of the states, the authorities, was to add a lot of regulations to make sure that the health of communities was preserved. So when I had to get to the check-in desk, first of all, I was recommended to come much earlier than when I was used to do. Secondly, I was getting to the check-in desk, and there was a long queue. And mainly the long queue was because the filter to scrutinize your documents, your identity, was much more cumbersome than in the past. The preparation of the employees to do that was not up to the task because regulations were changing every week. Now, when you could get out of the of the check-in desk, you had to go through security. It was relatively smooth, I have to say, and most of the shops were closed. So you did not really enjoy the experience. So when comparing this situation with the situation that we have now shows that things are improving. And of course, what we have done and we continue to advocate very strongly is to say no longer any measures that can make this process more cumbersome from an health identification check perspective. We are also saying, please learn from the lessons that we have collected over these last 2 years. We cannot be complacent with the objective efforts that authorities, stakeholders have done, because if this happen again, internationally speaking, despite the fact that we have technically the tools to facilitate the life of the passengers, still there is no multilateral recognition of one system that can allow a passenger to move from A to B if it was a normal business as usual scenario.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Mac, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so when you look at aviation and a total travel ecosystem, it coexists. It's a symbiotic relationship. And I think a lot of players in the tourism industry don't tend to understand aviation to a greater degree because of the complexities that surrounding multiple policies, and there's different elements of how aviation interacts with the total travel ecosystem. So I see it as a symbiotic relationship. It coexists. You cannot coexist with aviation on its own. It requires a multiple touch points from a destination management perspective. And it's all about air service development, air connectivity. So if a destination is to develop, then it really needs to understand how aviation connects the dots along the way. And what we saw during COVID was when borders close, aviation industry has to respond to that. Whether it's the airports or the airlines, they cannot fly anywhere. And we did see aviation airlines pivoting to cargo flights. Okay, so they had to stay afloat. They had to look for new revenue streams to exist. And it was all about crystal gazing. So if you look at the crystal ball, one would actually ask, when would this recovery take place? And we didn't have an answer to that, right? So we would look at data points out there, and we would sort of look at different government policies, what governments were doing, and take it from there and say, look, the capacity is increasing back. And we've got a major issue now because we're through a recovery trajectory, and certain markets are still opening up slowly. So airlines are looking at capacity rebuilding. But the way I see that moving forward is that some markets may have overcapacity. And if China opens up, you may see pulling of that capacity back. So there will be some paring back of capacity. So we as an industry need to understand what impact that would have. Because if you look at some of the data points out there, seat capacity in certain markets have gone beyond pre-COVID level. Okay, so the risk is if China opens up, the airlines will pare that back and re-divert its capacity into newer markets. And the other bit that I'd like to talk about is low-cost carriers. So low-cost carriers have been very much, they've been quite quick to add capacity on certain routes, and I'll give you some example. So if you look at Singapore to Korea, it's actually running above pre-COVID levels. And that's because of the introduction of low-cost service into that city pair. And if you look at Japan reopening recently, so Japan has actually seen new entrants in the low-cost space, so Zip Air and Singapore Scoot. So what that's driven has been, it's brought the prices down a little bit, so it's made it affordable for passengers to actually go abroad to a cheaper destination. So we talk about high fare environment, but actually if you look around and if you look at competition intensity, and if you look at the way the aviation market has grown with low-cost carriers, there are deals to be had.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm pleased that you mentioned the low-cost carriers, and it links to the issue about capacity, because I think we have turbulence now, we know that. We're going to get to a cruising altitude, but there's so many elements that need to stabilize. Small anecdotal example, when I was out in Alula this past week, one of my clients contacted, seeing that I was in the kingdom, and saying, can you please check about direct flights from Dubai to Alula, because I can't get any at the first week of December. Apparently all the flights have been canceled, and I thought, surely that's a mistake. I checked with the team in Alula, and I said, have you heard about this? And they said, yes, the flights were diverted. In that window of time, the flights were diverted from Dubai away from Alula without telling the destination. Where were they going? To Doha for the World Cup. So those flights are being put in. The point is, we're all recalibrating right now, and that's where patience and empathy are really important. But that said, if we look at the positive side, and we're going to spend a few minutes on sustainable aviation fuel, but when we look just on travel itself, aviation stood up as one of the strongest parts of the solution of recovery, because you really are the glue that brings the hotels, the travelers, the destinations, everyone. We don't have an industry without aviation. It's as simple as that. Some of the learnings and the lessons, exactly as you said, Stefano, we can't waste this. What are some of the blessings that came out of the 2 years of grounding that are actually going to make global travel better because of what we learned in the crisis? Do you see what I'm saying? We can't waste this time. Mac, from your perspective.
Yeah, from our perspective, it's all about passenger experience. So we did see digital transformation. So airlines and airports, they took the downtime they had in that period to really revamp some of the technology, digital services that they were offering to make it more seamless in terms of passenger experience through the airport, or whether it's interacting with the airline with their website, direct sales, so just making it much, much easier. And there's a lot of IT companies in travel segment that has actually pivoted to more seamless experience out there. And using that downtime was critical for them, because the industry is fast changing. Technology is leapfrogging every couple of years, if not every year. So there's different elements that you need to put that into perspective, and that's what we saw.
Brilliant. And Stefano, anything to add?
Yeah, I think from a more business-to-business perspective, that of course has a direct impact on the consumer. What we can learn is, in order to prevent a risk, is to diversify your portfolio. Being dependent on a market, on one customer only, can imply a risk. And I think that most of the CEOs of airports would respond to you that at the moment they are all focusing on boosting connectivity, of incentivizing the business of in connections. And this, of course, can be done through the right synergy with the tourism sector, because the experience does not stop at the airport, it goes well beyond it. This is one point. The other point has to do with the capacity of the business to adapt to changes. And here, what I can see is a higher competition. So the sophistication of your value proposition has to be the right one at the right time. And the pie is smaller. There are many parties involved to get that part of the pie. And there is scarcity of supply at the moment because of the objective need to wait for airlines to provide the appropriate number of aircraft. So you have to be quick.
And you both raised an interesting point about the whole dynamic of travel. So Paul Griffiths, the CEO from Dubai Airports, is very clear in saying they are now a center for hospitality that's based in an airport. So what is the total experience, and how do you leverage the revenue streams when people have that downtime once they're airside? Now, I have 4 minutes before I need to land this panel. One of the things that we find in our industry, in travel and tourism, is, as Haldane said, people turning and saying, we need to stop aviation, we need to stop aviation. And we know the consequence of that. But they'll argue, yes, but you're contributing to the climate crisis. My argument has always been, it's not about aviation, it's emissions that are the issue. And we need to keep flying, but in smarter ways. All the people in the room here, we have a challenge in terms of communicating credibly why aviation is an imperative and a good thing. What do you need this audience to understand so they can articulate it when people say to them, but Honorable Secretary of Tourism, how can you be supporting this? This industry's causing climate crisis. 60 seconds each. Mac.
Okay, so aviation contributes about 3% of total emission. So if you look at tourism as a whole, it's around 7 or 8%, roughly. So I think aviation industry has taken steps. It's created new aircraft, and new aircraft actually gives up lesser emission. And that opens up opportunities for travel and tourism because it allows for new city pairs to be developed. Point-to-point sectors that may not have been viable where you had to connect previously. So I think using the younger generation aircraft allows for new city pair development. And it's good for the tourism industry because you have that ripple effect. There's new tourism that's created, which can result in new resort development and so forth. So the list just goes on. So I think aviation is a key pillar in allowing for that. And I think with technology changes, aviation does play an important role in terms of environmental. There's the SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, which is still expensive, but it's going to be achievable once it gets scaled up.
And that's a really important point, that aviation going into a more sustainable model, the scale and the security issues around that and the cost is massive. Yeah. And it's simply being sensitive to that. Stefano, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think, I can benefit from the introduction already provided by Haldane in terms of this, but I have to say we have to recognize objectively there is a lot to do, ahead of us. So it's through the synergies with associations like ECI and PATA and their members that we can sensitize, urge authorities, states, investors to converge to the 1.3 trillion or something that is needed. And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And if you think from an investor perspective, you are almost anticipating this check before even having the solution to it. So it's extremely difficult. It requires a lot of education. It requires a lot of coordination because there are tools out there that can help. They have to be internationally acknowledged by the people that are competent to acknowledging them. We can help them. but it's a lot of work to do.
Exactly, and I think that's where it goes to taking it back to someone like Liz, of being able to get people to understand in our industry what exactly is the aviation case making around continuing to fly, but doing it in a safe, sustainable way and scalable way. So, ladies and gentlemen, we count down 8 seconds to take off. Please join me in thanking our lovely speakers, Mac and Stefano, for giving that perspective.